So I have a lot of questions, but I have to first open the floor for questions, comments.
Great powers. Turkish presence is understandable. It is not only in order to launch the satellite, but also to sell its arms and military armaments and to other manufactured goods. And you say that the United States has strategic interest. What do you mean when you say strategic interest? To me, the United States does not want to see a stable, peaceful Horn of Africa. For example, it has inconsistent foreign policy toward the Horn of Africa. For example, once it supports some certain groups, and other times it considers these certain groups as the one who committed genocide, something like that. So, what is the interest in the Horn of Africa? And also, as we said, and also you say the Horn of Africa became hotspot or military space and military parking space, and the relation between these foreign powers are competitive relation. They have competitive relation. So what strategies and policies the Horn states should take? And thank you.
Thank you. But I have a few questions. It's a little bit broader. As expert on international relations, I was expecting your lecture to guide us what kind of change. Honestly, we are not talking about this day-to-day change which is in the mouth of journalists. But I was anticipating at least you to bring what kind of change is happening at the global level in terms of economy, social, politics, and what kind of order is anticipated. That was my expectation. Probably you can have your view on this, and plus my curiosity, is there such an European perspective towards the whole of Africa? Because I guess every European power is having its own unilateral as outsiders. Superpowers are competing in the Horn of Africa to secure their national interest. They are doing their level best. It might be China, it might be Russia, Turkey, masses of America. Every European power is interpreting and defining the Horn of Africa in terms of securing their national interest. So the Horn interest is truly ignored, and the Horn remained epicenter of this spiral conflict. So do you think that really the problems, the crises that are, happening in the Horn of Africa are beyond European powers? If you are willing to do your level best, really to stabilize the Horn of Africa is my question. And finally, I do have a little bit questions, but probably let me conclude. Do you believe that spatial change is really happening? Because in the era of globalization, we are expecting that at least the world to move in one direction, right? In terms of economy, in terms of politics, in terms of wealth distribution. But in the post-1991 period, I was reading one interesting book, Fragmentation in the Era of Globalization. So, the gap between the rich and the poor has been, glaring from time to time, and superpowers are not strictly working to narrow down this level best, So, is there such a spatial change, honestly? Of course, in terms of technology, maybe in terms of information, we can talk about this, but spaces are losing their previous significances. But in terms of, meaningful issues like economy, like investment, like addressing poverty, inequality, etc., can we still talk about this spatial change? If Dr. Jonas allow me, I will come back once again to some of the questions. Thank you.
My name is Jonas, and I am a fourth-year political science and international relations student. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but your core argument was that the Horn is not as strategically important and relevant as we think it is, or as we conceive it is currently, and that it needs to reinvent itself periodically to stay relevant and to be part of the international politics. But I respectfully disagree. If we go back to the time where the problems of Horn of Africa started, from the colonial period or even before that, is in fact the involvement of other major powers in the region that is causing most of the turbulence in the Horn of Africa. We can start from the artificial boundaries to the pursuit of national interest of these big countries at the expense of Horn of African countries, and our stability and peace that is causing us to be like this. Even Al-Shabaab, most of its attacks and its doings are a mockery for the United States or whoever is involved in the global terror campaign, basically. So I think it's best for Horn of Africa to move away from the spotlight and pursue, focus on its internal problems and avoid or even duck international involvement. So that's what I think, and I would like to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you.
So a couple of days ago, I had the opportunity to read your article on social media dynamics on African politics, and which I found really fascinating, especially in the context of understanding Africa's role in changing global settings. So in relation to your journal and today's presentation, I had two specific questions. So how do you see the influence of these social media dynamics shaping Africa's and specifically Ethiopia's within the global arena, particularly when we consider this influence against the backdrop of traditional European settings? And additionally, in relation to the first question, how can these insights reshape, our understanding of Africa's evolving role in shaping global conversations and decision makings? So these are my questions. Thank you.
Be it in Ethiopia or even in the Horn of Africa. So, if there is a perspective, I will really capitalize on Dr. Demak's perspective in that. If there is an European perspective, what is the perspective on the potential cost of inter-communal differences to the future of Horn of Africa? How do you see it from the European perspective? Thank you very much.
Well, as for the Horn as a hotspot of the military build-up and of different strategies of different powers, of course, if we speak about the military involvement and of the military build-up, you should always think about motivations of different and the interests of different players, whether they are thinking of whether they have this perspective and this horizon and this goal of contributing to stabilizing, or the opposite. So there are of course such players, and there are such players. In I think the micro, the place which is now a kind of laboratory for this is Sudan, and it's a country with the most difficult access now. That is probably the most severe humanitarian crisis in the world. The most difficult space for humanitarian access. And the question of whether foreign regional players are contributing to the conflict is super essential, and we have all this debate and all the suspicions about, for example, United Arab Emirates supplying arms to the Rapid Support Forces via different, via Chad or via Libya. And the big question is whether Europe or whether other players who state their goal as stabilization are able to counter those practices. And as for now, it proves that they can't. That actually the malign actions of regional strong players, such as ones coming from the Gulf, the stakes for Europe or for the US are that losing good relations with them, extending too much pressure on them, would be less I mean, it would be more risky than pushing them more hardly to keep their hands off the conflicts in the Horn, particularly in Sudan. So that also really supports my core argument that that from their perspective, the question of the Horn is not on the top of the list. It can go to the top, but what is more important is to be in good relations with their friends in the Gulf countries, whatever they do. I hope that changes. I hope there is no opposition between the two positions. You can still be a good friend and demand your friend to stop to stop destabilizing the region. But as for now, that didn't happen, and I don't really know anyone to come up with a comprehensive and relevant strategy to address the Sudan conflict. I wrote an article in the Capital on that a few weeks back, so I think you can find it. As for different distinct perspectives of different players, Germany, France, other countries. I'm thinking about Hungary, the one that you are familiar with due to academic cooperation. Just a few weeks back, Hungary announced that it is sending its own military mission to Chad, and the stated, explanation for this mission would be that the Chad is the last remaining stable country in the Sahel belt, and that it is in the interest of Hungary to maintain this stability, to managing migration flows. That is really that isn't really a European perspective. That is a distinct Hungarian perspective, which doesn't take into account interests of the Chadian people, but it's pretty much instrumentalizing the country for its own particular goals. I think the good solution to, for example, why France got lost relevance in the Sahel region is that it doesn't really have a coherent outlook on the countries of the region. It is the biggest supporter of the junta in Chad, while it is the biggest critics of the juntas in Niger or in Mali. So what is France for? Is it for military rule, strong hand rule, or is it for democratic transitions? France cannot answer to this question because it is for one thing here and for other thing here, depending on whether those countries are favorable to France or not. So, of course, Europe is a big bloc. EU itself is 27 countries, and it's very, very difficult to overcome individual positions and go to this meta level of a common European position. It's a constant struggle, and we are still in the early days of actually making this European level a level of a kind of independent level on its own, particularly with France when France is continuing to be leading its policies in Africa, but now using the European banner. But on the other hand, the reason that the circumstance that made France be losing its relevance is also bringing opportunities for countries of our region, of the Central and Eastern European region, which never contributed to what your colleague described as colonial interventions, as you know, as dominating experience of domination or drawing the colonial borders. Without this baggage, without this bad history, even if we are smaller players, we can be seen as more credible or as more, you know, honest, as more similar, as having undergone similar historical experiences than that of colonial states. We have also been dominated and quasi-colonialized by our neighbors, particularly Russia, but also Germany. So I don't. If I were to identify some core European common position, that would be avoiding a total mess, avoiding a big an explosion of the horn. But if you are at the kind of level of low level threats, of low level you know, destabilizations, it's not strong. It's not a threat that is strong enough for Europe to come up with a solid, unified, long-term policies. It will always be wrangling between different countries who has its own interests. If it's manageable, it's okay. That's pretty much a game. What else? The influence of the social media and how it changed the ways politics is being done. I think it's a fundamental factor that the biggest game changer was that the distance between policymakers and between opinion makers and the general public is now gone. Everyone can be a publicist. Everyone can act as journalists. Everyone can act as political activists, and that doesn't really. Sometimes it opens space for new talent, for homegrown actors that are super positive in how they influence. I mean, the ways in which Sudanese civil society organizations are keeping their high-stake, you know, imprint in the situation on the ground that would be impossible without social media means. But it also brings a lot of, I mean, the kind of safety nets are all gone. It's an open space for incitement of ethnic hatred. It's an open space for mobilizing of people around any cause. We had this idea that if you look back into 2012, 2013, there was a book released by top managers from Google. It was called The New Digital Age. And their core argument was that we are entering a kind of golden age for human consciousness because everyone has access to the internet, and that means that false prophets, charlatans will lose any public, will lose relevance because they will not sustain confrontation with conscious, informed public. What happened instead is that there was never a better time for charlatans and for false prophets than now. So they missed something. The missing point was that the social media itself was seen as having this pro-freedom democratic notion during the Arab Spring, particularly. We believe that the Twitter or Facebook has this democratizing spirit somewhere in it. But no, it's just a tool that can make people come together for any cause, whether it's a good cause or it's a bad cause. Shortly after that, when the Syrian war broke out, I remember there was this case of the town of Madaya in Syria. That was a town which was encircled by the government forces, and it was being taken by hunger. It was pretty much cut off any supplies. And what emerged spontaneously in the Syrian social media was a twisted idea that people who were supporters of the government, of the Syrian government, were going into Facebook pages related to the city of Madaya, the ones that the people from that town would see, and they were posting pictures of their food on full plates of delicious foods, for just to mock those people and to make them suffer more because they were just running out of any foods. So you didn't have that before because people who had this crazy ideas like that couldn't really find peers, couldn't really make groups come together. In Zambia, the country which had the most integrated and the most invisible and the most peaceful refugee community of Rwandan refugees who came 20 years ago following the genocides. They just had the little shops and nobody ever had problems with them. All of a sudden, there were riots which broke out because many people believed that the Rwandans are hunting for children and they're killing them for ritual reasons. This idea came from the closed Facebook groups that some people simply shared this rumor, and then they radicalized more and more, and they went from discussions into real violence in the street. It was a complete surprise for the government. Nobody knew who those people are and what they want. But they found themselves because they were given a tool that helped them to mobilize around this hateful cause. I think it has a major impact on how I mean any policymaker will need to take it into account. In Europe, we tended to believe that there is always a margin of extremism and a margin of craziness in politics, but that margin is something like 5, maybe to 10%. In elections, you have crazy people who try to compete in elections. They always get around 5%, and it's okay. It's acceptable margin that the common sense and the common wisdom will always prevail over them. But the social media changed this proportions. Now you cannot be sure whether you are in this healthy majority or the extremist minority, and because this minority can very quickly dominate the majority, and with you never know whether you are in the mainstream or whether you are in the unacceptable extreme. With the same ideas, you can be this one year and the other thing next year. You look at the elections in the Netherlands, for example, which were won by hardline populist right-wing movement, which was considered acceptable margin for years, but which was able to grow into a biggest and win the biggest support. So that's a game changer that came with social media, and we are still learning how to adapt that. And I think Elon Musk is not doing a good job because this illusion of there is this question about what is more valuable. Is it free speech, free agora, free debate for any ideas, or is it a responsible speech and conversation that follows certain rules? And Musk came with this super liberal idea that no controls is needed. And if you are on Twitter, you could really see how it is losing relevance and it's losing its soul and it's going nowhere. So we had this debate always. Which value is what is more important? Freedom of speech or responsibility for words. If for many years we were still saying that, okay, you have a lot of fake news on the internet, but we can manage that. It's not that. It would be worse to fight it because that limits freedom of speech. What changed was the COVID, because that meant that being wrong could mean being harmful and being simply putting people's lives at risk. And I think the mask experiment is also another milestone in that. After mask, we will rethink the same idea again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.